Are you familiar with the concept of a water level? I learned about this when we were up in Montana building our log cabin up there. Basically, what the trick my old man had learned from somebody was you take a long piece of garden hose, and you put some clear hose on the ends of either end of it, and you fill it up with water. And then when you hold those two ends of that hose up next to each other, the water levels itself out in that clear part. And then what you can do is you can take those ends of that hose and move them 30 or 40 feet apart, and they will level each other out. So if you're laying a log down, for instance, for your log cabin, you can make sure that your ends are level. So where are we going with this, Don? Well, I remember how I said that I was a little bit worried about putting all my thruster batteries in the closet on the port side of the boat. I was worried about the weight distribution a little bit. Well, I think the boat's been trying to tell me for a little while that it wasn't level necessarily when it's sitting in the water. And the way it was doing that was back here on the port side of the deck. The deck washes down. There's a gunnel, I think it's called, that's the tow rail basically, that's 3 or 4 inches tall with the scupper holes along the side of it. And there's a scupper hole way at the end, right before you come up the first step. At the end of the deck, there's a step up to get into the aft cabin area back there. And when I first bought the boat, and ever since I've had it, I noticed that on that port side back in the back, right by that scupper hole, there would always be a little bit of water that would stay on the boat right in the corner there and wouldn't drain out. I mean, if I was washing the boat down, some would drain out, but there would always be a little puddle left in there, and it would get all kind of black and gross and nasty. And I also noticed that in the shower would do the same thing. On the starboard floor of the shower, the water kind of seemed to pool up there a little bit and wouldn't get to the drain. And since I have put those batteries all on the port side of the boat, that seems to have fixed itself. So that port side of the deck is no longer keeping that little puddle, and the shower's draining much better. So for whatever reason, I think we were maybe a little heavy on the starboard side of the boat, and so we were sitting a little bit offset, and we've got the unlikely surprise of leveling things out by putting all the batteries on the port side. So cool, there we go, we've leveled things up. I'm back up here and I have a full plate of things to do. I have a few, I'm going to call them self-inflicted problems I need to fix up. One is I mentioned when I was working on the lower helm dashboard down here, putting in the controls for the thruster. I did, basically the only thing that thruster control has is a hot and a ground wire that runs to it to power it, and everything else is wireless. I spliced my ground into an existing ground I had, and I think I ground it to the one that the stereo control is hooked to. And I think I don't have a good connection in there maybe on the stereo ground, because the stereo will start to turn on and then it'll kind of go dark after a minute. So I need to probably redo that connection and troubleshoot that, which means I got to get down in the dash and do a little electrical wiring there. I also, back in the aft cabin, if you go back 10 episodes, I don't know how many back, but I did put that tank watch system in. And I installed a probe down in my freshwater tank that's inside of a PVC tube that tells me how much water is in the freshwater tank. I'm not getting any indication out of my tank watch system of the level of the fresh water. And the only thing that has changed is on the back of that tank watch display unit and control unit. That's where you make all your connections for your remote sensors for the tanks. And I was trying to be really careful of those when I was putting that false floor back in after I wired up the solenoid for the thruster back there, but I believe I may have broken one of my connectors or made it come disconnected, because I'm not getting any freshwater tank indication right now. So I don't know, those were crimped and heat shrinked. They should have been fine, but they're not. So I'll have to see if I can figure out what's up with that. I think I'll just redo the connectors and should be fine, but I've got to do that. And then I did something dumb. So let me explain. you know how I went to all that trouble to put these cameras around the boat, right? And I've got the one up there on the upper deck that's shooting backwards off the back of the boat. And I've mentioned that, you know, it doesn't work right when I'm underway. The monitors don't stay powered up and so forth. But the camera has always worked just fine. However, it's mounted to the stainless steel railing up there with a couple of stainless steel clamps around the tube. And then the mount itself is just a piece of wood that I cut to shape and put the camera through. And it was never intended to be the final mount for that thing. It was more or less kind of like, well, let's see if this is going to work, and then once it does, I'll have somebody make me some stainless steel mounts, or I'll do something different for that. But a while back, I think it was when I was last out up around Lopez Island or whatever, at one point I was up there and I saw the Starlink pizza box antenna thing moving itself around trying to find the satellites after I stopped. And it was getting pretty close to coming down and hitting the top of my mount for the camera. I had them too close together. They're both mounted to that same stainless steel rail up there. And so I got up there at that time, and I was worried about that Starlink thing trying to come down to adjust itself and hitting the top of my mount for my camera and then blowing up the Starlink because it couldn't, you know, breaking the gears or something in there because it couldn't get itself adjusted properly. So I undid all my zip strips and loosened up my thing, and I moved it all over for the camera, the mount for the camera, and then I zip stripped it all back up. Now, that thing runs off a power over Ethernet cable. So you have this Ethernet cable that's got a cap on it, and you have the connector that comes off the back of the camera with all of its factory sealed up cap and the female end, and you slide the cap back the cable off down the cable a little bit so that your RJ45 end is sticking out, and you clip it into the female connector, and then you slide that cap back up and twist it on, right? And that creates your waterproof connector for that thing, so it can be outdoors. However, there's kind of a right up way, the factory side should be up, or there's the wrong up way, which is that cap side facing up. And I didn't pay close enough attention after I moved that thing and I was stripping everything back up, and I accidentally put it so that the cap side was up instead of the factory side. So water came down the cable. It rains up here, surprisingly enough. Water got down there and came through that cap end around the cable because that's not the perfectly sealed up end, and it got in there and corroded my cable. So when I got here on the boat, the back camera was not working, and it was showing the little icon on the display saying it was not connected. So I started looking at it. I'll show you it. When I took it apart, it had obviously gotten wet in there and corroded, and so I've got to fix that. Now, there's three possible scenarios here. One is I may just need to cut that RJ45 end off and put a new one on, and I did that a million times as a network technician, so that's not a big deal for me. I'm not too worried about that. However, the fact that it got all corroded and shorted out in there, it might have clobbered the port on the power over Ethernet switch, because that thing's transmitting 3.5 or 3 volts to power up that camera, and that may not be transmitting power anymore. It might be dead, so I might have killed the port on the switch. And worst case, I might have killed the camera. So I'll have a little troubleshooting to do. I was going to say debugging, but that's not really what I'll be doing. I'll be doing troubleshooting. So I'll undo my zip strips. I'll pull the cabling into the top deck up there so I can work on it without hanging over the side of the boat and figure out what's going on. So the camera, to test if the camera's working, I can take it down in the engine room and clip it into one of the existing cables down there and see if the camera comes back, and that will tell us if the camera's good, and then I'll continue on troubleshooting from there. So I've got that to do. Tomorrow I have an appointment up in Blaine, Washington with the Customs and Border Patrol people up there. I'm trying to get my Nexus card so I can go in and out of Canada easier. I don't know if I really needed that thing, but I thought, well, let's do it. I passed an FBI background check back in the day when I had my IT company because I was in the FBI's InfraGuard thing. So I should be able to pass a background check to get that thing, and I'm hoping that it will then make it much easier to go in and out of Canada when we take the boat up there. So that's tomorrow, and then when that's all behind me, then I can get the haul out scheduled and get the boat out and get the thrusters bolted on the back and finish the wiring up from there. So that's the plan. Let's see how it goes. Alright, here's my camera from the back of the boat. I got it off without dropping it in the ocean, so that's a good thing. And you can see this is the connector I was talking about that has the factory end on it, which is really good. Now, if you did not have a power over Ethernet switch, you can supply power right here, but I do. So normally, if I'd have put this with this side up, we'd have been all good, because you can see that's really sealed up nice and tight. And these are our little LEDs. This says we got power. This says we have a link to our switch. And then there's our female RJ45 connector in there. And here's the other end of that thing. So this is the end that has the cap that kind of slides back and forth on the cable. And you can see that's the problem, is there's a little cup in there, if you will, that water could pool up in if you left this side up, which some dummy did instead of this side. So when this was all together and I stripped it, I put it the wrong way up. If I'd had it that way up, we'd have been all good. That's the happy side. That's the sad side. So you can see the difference between the two of those. So let's go take this camera down to the engine room and see if it still works. I'm not in Seattle anymore. I'm not on the boat. I'm back in Utah. Unbelievable! I know. I know. I'm a man that lives between two time zones, and it's a little bit crazy, but something important came up I had to get back for. So I'm back here, and today I'm just out stretching my legs a bit in the mountains. So I did not get any more work done on the boat. I didn't get that camera checked out. I did not get the thrusters on, but we're still going to be in winter when I get back up there, so we'll still be in that slow period of time for the yard. So I think it'll be fine. I'll get the thrusters on there next time around and get the rest of that work done. I promise. For right now, look over my shoulder. It's a lovely day up here, and we do have some snow, not a ton yet. It's early, but boy, you know, we've been in a drought so many years, we need a lot. But anyway, I just wanted to check in, let you know. where we're at. So that's where we're at. No real progress. Sorry.